Master Your Mindset Radio, episode 22.
Welcome to Master Your Mindset Radio, the show where we empower you to conquer limiting beliefs and transform your world with your gifting and purpose. Now for your host, Elizabeth Nader.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Master Your Mindset Radio. And today I'm so excited to have with us someone who's become a friend, somebody who I connected with immediately and I really admire and look up to, and I'm excited for you guys to get to know her. Her name is Heather Glogolich. And Heather, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Awesome. Welcome.
Thank you.
Really excited to have you here. So guys, this is going to be an interview that is going to have some tough aspects to it. Heather has gone through something in her life that's difficult, and she's willing to tell the story, but it's something that unfortunately many women experience. And clearly, as a survivor and a thriver through all of this, her purpose in life, I think, is really coming into focus, and she'll share that with you. But I want her to talk to us about what she's been through and how she's come out the other side. So we want to tell the story. And by the way, Heather is a law enforcement officer. She's a mother of 4 kids. I have that right?
Yes.
Yes, 4 kids. What are their ages?
Actually, one's going to be 13 tomorrow. One's about to be 12. I have a 5-year-old, and the other one just turned 4.
Oh, piece of cake. Life is easy for you.
I'm super bored in life.
Super bored. Nothing to do. I know how that is. So she obviously has a full life, but an incredible story. And I personally, when I find people like this who have survived such amazing odds in life, I want to be their champion and I want to tell their story. And this is a platform for me to do that. And so Heather, let's start with what happened to you, and maybe a little bit of the buildup, but the buildup to what happened to you. I guess it's been 11 years ago in 2008.
Yeah. So I got hired as a police officer in 2004, and I met my ex-husband in the police academy. And it was a very fast courtship. We got married in 2006, and we had our first daughter in 2007, and then we had our son in 2008. So very, very fast. And I really didn't grow up in a family that had addiction issues or anything. I mean, it was, now I look back and it seems like it's an abnormal family that I grew up in, because everything I see being a law enforcement officer seems like how I grew up was kind of out of the norm. But it was, nobody drank in our house. Nobody smoked. We always had iced tea. There was never a bottle of wine to be found anywhere. We didn't even drink socially. My dad, didn't go out at night with friends. My mom didn't go out at night with friends. Everything revolved around our family. So when I met my ex-husband, I was already in a different culture because I was moving into a police culture, which was not something that my family had either. And immediately it was just this connection, and he made me feel like I was the only person in the room. And I honestly felt this was it, right? I'm out of college. I have a real career that I'm going into. And what is the next step we all kind of think of? And it's to find that person and to start a life. And it brought me into a relationship, which I really, hindsight, I see so many things that probably should have warned me. He was a big drinker, party drinker. I didn't think much of it back then. I really didn't know what alcoholism was, to be honest. And he had lost his mother when he was younger, so he had some things he dealt with too. And I became a police officer to help people. So I know, looking back now, when I got in the relationship with my ex-husband, it was also a part of me wanted to help fix him, which is looking back now, I know you can't really do that. That's got to be a personal journey, and you can have people along the road that help, but it wasn't going to be me. And he would drink, and he would start to check my phone, and he pushed me on our honeymoon out of nowhere. And that was the first time anything had ever really been physical. And he told me on the honeymoon that he could kill me down there and nobody would find me. And I was like, what? And we were both had been drinking, and it was our honeymoon. It was all inclusive. And when we both woke up the next morning, he acted like nothing happened. So I just kind of assumed that, hey, this is probably just something he was so drunk he doesn't even realize. And I just let it go. And there are ways that he acted that he should have understood what I was doing at work. And instead it became more of a control thing for him. Why are you taking so long to answer me back? Who are you riding around with? Why do you have to work overtime? Why are you switching your schedule? All these things that tried to make me feel like I wasn't holding up my end of the bargain in the wife department, I guess is how I was feeling at the time. It was very manipulative. It made me feel like I was in the wrong all the time, when in actuality I hadn't done anything wrong. And he slowly started to alienate my friends from me and even my family, and moved me very far away from where I grew up, very far from where his family lived. And we were out in the country where we didn't even have our own police department. That's how rural it was.
Heather, let me ask you a question about that, because I think it's interesting. I just want to stop you there for a second. You talk about your childhood, the fact that you didn't have exposure to addictive behavior. You didn't have exposure to, let's say, even abuse in the home in any way. You didn't see your father abuse your mother in any way. So you basically came into this marriage without any of that experience, meaning is it right for me to say that you immediately question yourself rather than saying, oh, here's an old pattern? You're wondering, wait a minute, what am I doing wrong here? Which I'm assuming he kept feeding into that.
I don't know, in all honesty. I think there's so much more to it just because of what my job is. And I didn't want to be a failure. I stood in a church in front of God and my family and my friends, and I vowed to love this man, and in sickness and in health. And I took those vows really seriously. So in my mind, I had seen my parents who, have now been married for 42 years. At the time, and I would have been the only person ever to be divorced in my family. So, there was that. There was, I don't want to ask for help. There was, can I fix him? There was, I don't want him to lose his job because he's got an alcohol problem, which I slowly started to learn after, we had been married a little while. But yeah, I think the fact that I saw it in other people's lives that I would respond to while I was at work, but it wasn't something that was ever part of my personal life, probably made it a lot harder for me to realize that I was allowing it to happen. And I really hate that phrase, because no one ever allows domestic violence to happen to them, because it isn't my choice to be abused or ridiculed or put down or controlled. It's the other person's choice. And, it's really up to us to react to that. But, there is guilt, and there still is, even almost 11 years later, of how did I let it get this far?
Sure.
Sure. I feel... And I'll get into that more after I finish telling the story about how I still have guilt to this day about how, so many things I felt like I did wrong.
Right.
And I could have protected myself, but.
Well, continue. So he's got you now isolated.
Yeah. And not isolated, but isolated, right? There's guilt. There's a ton of guilt. And every time I would call him out on his behavior or be like, listen, this is it. I've had it. He was like, oh, this happened to me or this happened to me. And it was more of this try to control me through his trauma by making me feel bad and taking it off of him and taking ownership away from him and putting blame on things that allegedly happened in his life, which I've come to find out hadn't. He really, I'm not a psychiatrist, but he is definitely a narcissist. Right. And he loves to change circumstances and make up lies in order to feed into other people feeling sorry for him.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And, here's the thing, I see it every day at my job. I see people abused, and I see how it is definitely an everyday thing for some people, but it wasn't for me. When it came to a head, it came to a head. And I think the thing is that I was pregnant for almost the duration of the time we were actually together, right? We got married in March of 2006. I got pregnant with my oldest in May of 2006. I had her in January of 2007. And we had a physical confrontation in May where I actually had strangulation mark on my neck. And I got called in to the office, and they asked, what's going on? And I look back and I see how pathetic I was and saying, oh, I fell down the stairs. I literally said that, right?
Oh my gosh.
That's literally the thing. We're like, yeah, you fell down the stairs when we're at someone's home and dealing with this. And I just, I didn't want to lose my job. I didn't want to lose his. We had just bought a home. We wouldn't have been able to afford it without both of our salaries. And I was a brand new mom. And I said, at that point, he turned around and he ran off after he held me against a wall. and he put a shotgun to his head. And I thought at that point I took all the right steps, right? Like, I got him to not kill himself. I didn't embarrass him in front of his coworkers by trying to get him help, but he made phone calls to try and get therapy started, which is something he had never done before and refused to, because he had a bad experience when his mom died. And, you know, I took all the guns out of the house. He wasn't allowed to wear his duty weapon home. I left mine locked in my locker at work. All the shotguns were removed from the house. I mean, I took all the steps in order to make it safe enough where I felt like I was in control. But when I was, and then I got pregnant, right? So one of the big things that it's very hard to talk about, and I've actually only recently started talking about, but most people don't talk about, is the sexual abuse that comes along in being in a marriage that is filled with domestic violence. Because I think there's still this old school mindset of you can't be raped by your husband, right? You belong to them, right. Or at least that's the mindset. I know that's changing. I know that's evolving. I know most people sit here and be like, no, I'm not owned. But, you know, it's makeup sex. And that's what it came down to. But it wasn't because it was something I wanted. It was to appease him, to make it better. And I was, you know, I suffered through it, right? And so I ended up getting pregnant again, right, to appease the situation. And then I was pregnant. When I was pregnant, I look back now and I can see I was a symbol of ownership for him at that point, right? I was carrying his baby. It was a visual sign to the world that I was owned by him, without him having to say it. So now we're talking, you know, there were 4 months where I wasn't pregnant after my oldest, and then I had my son, and he was born in February of 2008. And then it started to get like pretty bad. You know, we were very stressed with 2 kids. Money was very tight. I went back to work both times 8 weeks after. You know, my mom was watching our kids, and I told him no more alcohol. And I come to find out after the incident I'm going to tell you about happened, he was actually hiding alcohol in the insulation of our detached garage. So I wouldn't see the bottles in the garbage, right? Very smart of him, because he knows I'm trained to see these things. And so many people have asked, well, didn't you see him drinking? And the difference is I worked strict day shift. So I would be home by 7:30 at night, and I would be in bed by 9 at night. And he would work the late evening shift. So he wouldn't be home until I was already asleep. And so no, he would get bottles of alcohol from where he worked and drive home and drink and like just chug bottles of vodka and then go in the garage, hide them in the insulation, and I would never know the difference.
Wow.
So the one night on October 16th, 2008, my ex-husband came home and he woke me up, and he was yelling and he was screaming. He's like, "That's it, I've had it." And I guess he was pissed off because the bears had gotten to our garbage and it was all over, and he was drunk, and he was visibly drunk when he woke me up. And I had it because while I wasn't physically abused a lot, I was emotionally exhausted from him, because I never knew who I had walking in the door, and I was always walking around on eggshells. And even if I knew I was right, I had to pretend that I was wrong and appease him and make everything okay so it didn't become bigger. So I had it that night. I was like, you know what, I'm done. I'm just done. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm figuring it out, and I'm done. And that just set it off. And when I didn't chase after him walking out of the bedroom, he grabbed me by my hair and dragged me out into the living room and proceeded for 4 hours just to beat me up. And he headbutted me. He bit my face. He grabbed a knife and tried to put it in my hand to have me cut myself while he was yelling at me. Like, this isn't going to be my fault. I'm going to make it look like you killed yourself. And he was yelling at me not to wake up the kids, that if the kids woke up from my screams, that he would kill all of us. So now I'm in like hyper, protective mode of my kids while just putting up with 4 hours of just being beaten. And the whole time I've noticed that he's got his gun in his waistband.
His gun from work. Yeah.
Which he hadn't been bringing home. So now that I look back on that, crazy enough, it took me almost a decade to realize this. It had to have been premeditated, right? He must have come home like with it for a reason, whether it was for himself or for me, it was something. And, it was just 4 hours of torture of him yelling and just hitting me and making me lose consciousness and then letting me come back and just telling me everything was my fault and that I wasn't good enough. And it was degrading. And
why are
all
you
I was doing the whole time was trying to survive.
At this point, you're trying to survive. You're not really fighting back because you think maybe you can get to the end of it. Give us the mindset of what's happening while you're being attacked and you've got your kids in the next room.
Yeah. That was what had me not fight back, to be honest, because he is taller than me. and he is stronger than me, which in all honesty in my job isn't hard, but usually, I always tell everybody now, like when I train I always train to win, right? Because no matter what, but it was different. He had a handgun, I didn't. Whenever I go to something at work, if I need it, it's there. I don't ever want to have to use it, but I have it. I had nothing, right? So even in my head, I'm thinking, that's his gun. That's not a gun that I've trained on. His was a Beretta, and we carried a Glock. And for anybody who knows anything about guns, one has a safety and one doesn't. Mine didn't. So I'm not used to using a gun that has a safety, and all that's in my head. And I'm like, if I go to grab this and I don't get it, and he gets it before I do, and he shoots me, and then he kills my children, like, it was worth me putting up with what I was going through, knowing that he would sober up at some point, because he was never abusive when he was sober, physically. He was obviously always controlling and manipulative. However, he was never abusive physically when he was sober. And so I just put up with it, and I tried to console him, and I tried to find words to make him feel better. And he wasn't my husband that night. There was this blank, inhuman stare that came over his face, and it culminated with him. I was on the ground, and he had just like kicked me in the stomach, and I was in the middle of my living room, and I see it now. I'm in a black t-shirt, and I'm in these pants that are my favorite pajama pants, and he had taken the gun out of his waistband, and he said, "Call out of work. You're not going to work tomorrow." And I was like, "Great." And I was like, fine, I'll call out of work. And in my head, I'm thinking he just bought himself time so he can kill me and bury my body. Right now, back then we didn't have these things like code words. People didn't know me good enough for me to like have a certain voice and them know something was wrong. And so I called out of work. And then the next thing he said, "Now call your father and say goodbye." And he knows my father is my best friend. And I straight out said, no. I go, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. Do what you need to do. I'm not calling my father. And that's when I took a stance. And at that point, he put a pillow over my head and laid me on the ground. And then I could hear him take a bullet and rack around into the chamber of the gun. And obviously, some people may not know what that sounds like, but for someone who trains with that sound, I knew exactly what it was. And you could hear the creak of him pulling the trigger as the gun was pushed against the pillow, which was on my head. And I thought that was it. Like, I'm really surprised that I didn't just pass out of fear.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I heard a thud, and he fell to the ground, and he was passed out. And I didn't move. I just didn't move. I laid there for over an hour, and I didn't move. I didn't cry. I barely was breathing because I was trying to be quiet, hoping that he wouldn't wake up still drunk. And I was like, as long as I can stay here and be quiet and let him sleep this off, I'll be okay.
Do you think he didn't shoot you because he passed out, or what do you think today now?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think, I could sit here and think and speculate. I mean, did he maybe just fake being asleep so he could get out of it?
Oh, wow.
Thinking, did he just really pass out? Like he was just exhausted from it all? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, somebody was watching over me, right? Like God was looking over me at that point, and I know that.
This is 4 hours at this point, as you can remember, 4 hours of constant physical and verbal abuse.
Yeah, constant 4 hours of it.
Wow.
And I know that because as soon as he felt like he was on the ground, and I mean, I like to say unconscious because he pretty much was, because he was passed out. I looked right at the TV and I saw what time it was. And it was me trying to figure out, okay, what time did he get home? I know what time he got home because this is what time he gets home. And I just knew, how, and I remember calling out of work and what time it was, because those are the things you have to do. And just all the little things are still so vivid in my mind. And I just laid there. And after about an hour and a half, he like moved, and then I just kind of froze, and I started to think, well, what if I like got up and tried to get the kids out? But they were so young. I mean, my son was only 8 months old and my daughter was 20 months old. Like, they can't be quiet if you tell them to be quiet if they wake up. So, and he was parked behind me. So, I really had no way of getting out of it. So I just laid there, and I knew in that moment that I was okay. It was a sense that nothing was going to happen to me, that he was going to wake up. And, he did around 7:30 in the morning, and I was still laying there, and my shirt was ripped, and I was bloody, and I was starting to be bruised, and the kids were starting to wake up, and we kind of just ignored each other. And I went into survival mode, and I said, listen, Hunter, my son hasn't been feeling well, and I should probably take him to the doctor. And he's like, I'll take him to the doctor. So in my head, I'm like, great, this is, something's going to happen. I'm going to call the cops and he's going to have my son, and that's not going to be safe. So
Right.
I called my pediatrician. She's amazing. She's like, I'll just call something in over to the pharmacy for you. And I was like, okay, good. And then I was like, listen, we don't have any food. Like, I'm supposed to work all weekend. You weren't supposed to be here. All the food is already at my mom's for the kids. Somebody's got to go to the store. I was like, I'll go. And he's like, no, I'll go. And I was like, okay, good. He'll be out of the house and I'll have time. And so I made a list of all the things I knew he wouldn't be able to find. And he left, and he's like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I'm going to take a shower. I'm like, I need like a 20-minute hot shower. My son's down for his nap for the morning. I'll take our daughter in there with me, and I need to just clean up. He's like, well, what's going to happen to us? And I said, we'll be okay. And I just said that, right? Because I knew I didn't want to lie. I didn't want to say everything's going to be great and happy, but I knew I would be okay. So I just said, we'll be okay. And I really just meant my daughter and I and my son. And he left, and he took my keys with him. So I couldn't leave. And I had a cell phone and I had a house line. And I picked up my cell phone about 7 times and called 911 and hung up. And the 7th time I picked up, and this female dispatcher picked up, and I still downplayed it. I said, listen, my husband and I are both cops. We had a really bad argument overnight. He left. I need someone to come here. And I kept downplaying it. And then he started to call my phone, and I wasn't answering. And so then they came in far and few between, they became closer and closer. And I started to panic, and I think she could hear it. And I finally said, listen, I don't know where his gun is. It was really bad. I need someone here, and I need someone here now, because I think he knows I'm calling you, and he's on his way back. And I never got a chance to thank her, but what she did next saved my life. She sent officers straight to the grocery store instead of sending them to my home.
Wow.
And to tell you what happened next is crazy. He walked out of the grocery store and saw all the cops walking towards the entrance, and he turned around and put his hands up. And to me, that's like a huge sign of guilt, right? Like, you don't know why they're there. There could be something else going on. And he knew. And that was the hardest and thing I've ever done. And then the second call was to my father. And I said, Dad, I need you to come here and get the kids. I need to go and get a restraining order. And then the third person I called was my captain. And that victim mindset still sets in, and that whole fear of losing my gun, even though I was the victim, set in. And I said, Cap, I had a bad domestic with my husband last night. I'm like, that's why I called out a sick. I'm like, he's under arrest. My gun is at work. Like, I had to put that out there because I didn't want them to think I did anything. So it's just all this. And then they show up at my house like 15 minutes later, which means they must have sped to get there to me. And I'm sitting there, and my living room is atrocious because it's just everything's broken, and I'm ripped clothes and no bra and these ripped pants, and my face is puffy, and I'm bleeding, and you can see bruises around my neck and on my face, and marks from like the knife as he held it against my wrist. And like, these 2 men are people that are supposed to trust me to protect everybody else, and I'm sitting there thinking I can't even protect myself.
Oh my gosh.
And there's just so much that goes with it, right? And in that moment, I knew I had the strength to get through it. I knew I did, but it was so much more. And I look back now, and I'm like, every single person that goes through this has that shame and embarrassment of what everybody's going to think of them. And mine was just different, right? And I got through it. I went down and I got a restraining order, and I could talk on and on about how I was, not treated well by the criminal justice system, which pissed me off because, I chose to uphold the law and to protect citizens, and I vowed, to honor it, and they let me down. And my ex-husband ended up being charged with 2 counts of aggravated assault, which was for everything he did. But then he was also charged with possession of a weapon for unlawful purposes. He had 2 charges. One was for the gun and one was for the knife. And then he was also charged with criminal restraint, terroristic threats, and harassment. So there were those charges. And kind of just to point out the person that he went to grand jury, which, for anybody who doesn't know what grand jury is, it's kind of like the precursor to a trial for them to say, yes, we have enough burden of proof in order to move forward with a trial.
Right.
And defendants never testify at grand jury because it's different rules of law, and they can basically ask whatever they want, and anything you say can be used against you, and you're not protected the same as you are during a trial. And he chose to testify. Wow. And he went in there, and he was out, by the way. He did 2 weeks in jail, and then his father posted bail for him, and he went to a 28-day rehab program, and then he was out on bail. And I slept with my gun under my pillow.
I'm sure you did.
Day.
I mean, yeah. I can't imagine at this point you've had how many days to even heal from this physically, much less emotionally. And this guy's on the street.
Yeah.
Is he calling you? Is he threatening you? Is he doing anything like that?
So I had gotten a restraining order. And back then there was bail, right? There's no bail in New Jersey anymore. We have what's called bail reform. And now there's no monetary bail. So as part of the bail that the judge actually did put on him, he put a no contact order on there, which is the exact same thing as a restraining order. Mm-hmm. And so I chose not to go ahead with a final restraining order, which I kind of regret now, not even thinking about it. But I really thought he was going to go away for a really long time. So I figured, why am I going to sit in a trial for a civil hearing for a restraining order with a man who is my ex-husband when it's already there? It's already set for a judge until everything's adjudicated, right? Until he serves his time, whatever happens. So there was that, and he was not supposed to have any contact with me at all, except for when he was at his rehab, he started sending me letters, and he sent letters to my mom and dad also. And so to circle back to when he testified in grand jury, which was about a year and a half after, I want to say, everything happened, it was like the summer of 2009 grand jury. So the summer of 2009 was grand jury, and he testified, and he went in front of the entire grand jury, which is, civilians, and basically said that he'd never hit me, that I got those marks because I wouldn't let him leave. He wanted to leave. He found out I was cheating on him, and he wanted to leave, and he had to push me out of the way so he could leave.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah. So I came in and testified after, and we presented all the letters, and he obviously had no proof of me cheating or anything like that. The prosecutor asked him, he's like, no. He's like, well, what about a name of a person that we could interview? He's like, no, I don't know who it was. Like, he had nothing. And the grand jury turned around and added charges of kidnapping, which is a first degree offense, which is like the highest thing, and 3 counts of perjury, which is huge.
Wow.
So he was facing like 75 years in jail, and he ended up taking a plea deal, which they allowed for 6 months, as to which he did 2 months and 1 week. And the day he got out, he messaged me and said, I want to see my kids.
Wait, hold on. Can you summarize that again? He was facing 70 plus.
Yeah.
And he did how much?
He took a plea deal for 6 months. And the reason being is that they said that there was no history, and that it was the first time I had ever called, and he was a pillar of the community, and he obviously passed a psych exam to be a police officer, and he had done all these great things, and they felt it was because of his substance abuse and not really who he was. And that if I pushed it, it would be a long trial, and maybe I wasn't up for it, and it would affect my job. It was so much that went into it, and it wasn't my decision. And they took the plea deal. He took the plea deal for 6 months, and because of good behavior, he did 2 months and 1 week.
So what were you thinking at that point? Like, were you feeling, this is where you're saying the system failed you, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's just one of the ways, but yeah, absolutely.
And the fact that you had not called before, which from the stories I've heard from other people is pretty common. You don't pick up the phone the first time. I mean, you've described in your mind that you're going, well, I don't know, maybe this is this, maybe it's that, maybe this will pass. It's only because he drank too much. I mean, it's not like the first time it happens, that's it. You're picking up the phone, you're telling everybody. I mean, really, since you've met, I'm sure a lot of women have been through this. How many people pick up the phone the first time?
It's rare. It's very rare.
And that was
because it's embarrassing.
Because it's embarrassing. Yeah. I mean, you're basically deciding to out him and out your whole life, and in your case, even your career, and you don't know. So the fact that you didn't do that was ultimately used against you, as well as other factors, when they decided to give him a little slap on the wrist.
Correct.
And since then, has he repeated this behavior with other women that you know about?
So funny you say that. So I was his first wife. He is now married to his third wife, and his second wife and I obviously did not get along because he said I made everything up, and she obviously thought that I was this horrible person, and he ended up doing something similar to her, but she locked herself in the bathroom and was able to get away without being injured. And she only recently just told me this. It's obviously nothing that I can do about it because that's her story, right? That's for her to be able to, and she just wanted him out of her life. She didn't have any kids with him. In that aspect, she's very lucky. At the same time, that's very hard for me to say because my older two kids are two of my four blessings in life, right?
Sure.
But yeah, and he's married to his third wife, and I am scared for her all the time, but I've opened myself up. She knows what happened. I don't know where her mind is at, and she's very good to my older two kids because the court allows him to see them every other weekend. And I'm there for her if she needs me. I hope she knows that. I've said it to her. But then I'm also walking a very thin line of having him, try and do something to me. Like, I fear like if I put myself out there to help her too much that, I become a target again.
Right. So let's go back to you then. Let's go back to you. So at this point, it's the absolute most traumatic moment, I'm imagining, those 4 hours at that point in your life. And hopefully I pray never you experience anything like that or close to that again. So how are you working yourself back from your mindset, mentally, emotionally, from that? It's one thing to go through the legal process. It's one thing to get him physically away from you. But now you're left with, how do I move forward? How do I see myself? How do I deal with this correctly?
Yeah. I was 28 years old when this happened. And so still really young, only a few years on the job. And I talk about not knowing anything about addiction and the way my family was. And I think because of who my mom and dad were and who they raised me to be, I was extremely resilient. But then I looked back at all the things that I lost out on while I was married to him, right? I gained my daughter and my son, which are amazing, but there are so many things I didn't do. Like, I stopped going to the gym because he would ask, well, who are you trying to look good for? And obviously physical fitness is a huge part of being a police officer. And I didn't go back to college because he says, what do you need a degree for? Like, you already have your job. Like, what do you need to do that for? There were all these things. I wasn't allowed to play softball anymore. It was just all these things that where it was like, no, you need to be here. You're my wife. You're going to take care of our kids. And that's that. And it pissed me off. Like, I started to get so pissed. I'm like, how did I let this happen? Right? Like, there's that mindset creeping in. Like, what was I thinking? Like, man. And I was mad at myself. And so the first thing I did was I enrolled in college and I finished my bachelor's degree. And I became extremely obsessed to the point where maybe it became unhealthy at times of never settling, right? I have this mindset where if I want it, I'm going to get it and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And I'm going to make big goals and I'm going to achieve them. And I've gotten past the whole, every time I do it, it's kind of like a big FU to him because it's really not about him anymore. It was in the beginning, but it's just evolved to me just being who I am and wanting positivity to just flow, right? And only just recently I'll never forgive him for what he did. I'll never forget it. I realize that so many people like to tell me that, forgiveness isn't for the person who did something. It's for the person who needs to let go of it. It's just not something I can say when I'm ready to do. And I actually am glad I don't forget about it because it makes me strong. I am able to help victims of domestic violence in a way I would have never been able to if I didn't go through that. I can talk to people who come into my police department who are going through it and look at us cops and say, oh, you're not dealing with anything I've ever dealt with. You don't know how I'm feeling. And I could say, actually, I do. I've been there. It is not easy. It is not going to get easier. It's actually going to get harder before it gets easier because you are going to have self-doubt and you're going to want to have it go easy and you're going to want to believe everything. And really, when it comes down to it, you have to just believe in yourself that you're enough. How do I say that to people if I don't believe it?
You are enough. Myself? You are enough. That I've heard you say that before. It seems to be kind of like the theme that came out of this.
Yeah, and at the same time, my mindset is it's never enough, right? Like I know I'm enough, but I know I'm enough to be able to keep going and to make the most out of my life. And I know that one of my biggest things is to be in a relationship with my current husband and show my 2 children what a healthy relationship looks like, because I know every other weekend they're not getting that example. And I have to fight 12 out of 14 days every 2 weeks to make sure that they're seeing what they're going to be able to take forward with them when they're in a relationship. I need to make sure that my son does not follow in my ex-husband's footsteps. I need to make sure that my daughter does not fall susceptible to somebody treating her the way he treated me.
Right.
That's my number one goal in life, and to help other people see the same thing. And I feel like we've talked a lot about female victims, and unfortunately, that's just who the majority of the victims are.
Right.
But I mean, we're seeing more and more of male victims finally coming forward because they're not worried about that stigma of, I have to be stronger because I'm the man and I can't report her because look at how much smaller she is than me. It's evolving into people finally realizing that they deserve more.
So you're seeing, and it's amazing the job that you have, that you would go through this and then be, of course, I'm sure you show up in a lot of homes where this is happening. And so you're telling me that you're seeing a lot of male victims as well.
I mean, I wouldn't say a lot, but more than there was 10 years ago when I went through this.
Okay. Right. And so that obviously signals that we're accepting what people are saying more, that we're not thinking they're crazy. We're not turning a blind eye, but are we where we need to be?
I don't think we'll ever be where we need to be. It's funny enough because I teach a class. I'm an adjunct professor, and we started talking about it. My class that I'm teaching this semester is called Women in the Criminal Justice System. And part of that is, women who commit crimes, women who are victims of crimes, and then actual women in law enforcement like myself. And we took it back to, biblical terms and, back to when men it was instilled in their mind to be the protectors. Right. And they had to use violence in order to protect us, to kill for us, to be able to have food for us to eat while we were at home tending to the kids. And the evolution shows that, men don't need to feel that way anymore. Right. Like we don't have to kill our food anymore. I mean, obviously there are people who obviously butcher and do things for that like us, but it isn't just the way it is. Right. We're not cavemen anymore.
Right.
And the evolution of that mindset has come, but there's still so much more to do. You still have that paradigm of, women being the weaker gender,
right,
and men being the stronger gender. And I mean, it's evident in my work as well, right? Like I can go hands-on with anybody that I want to, but it doesn't mean I need to. And the guys are still going to hold the door open for me, and they will still come to my aid. And they're more mad if someone fights me because I'm a girl than they are if they fight another guy cop.
Right.
It's just, you can call it chivalry, you can call it whatever it is, but there's always going to be some kind of inequality. And I really tried to change my mindset and show it as an individualistic kind of thing. Like, I appreciate being a woman. Yes. I appreciate having that femininity, but at the same time, I'm not going to take anybody's shit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I'm not allowed to curse on your podcast.
Yeah, no, the FCC is not listening, so it's all right. I forgive you. But I think that's interesting because as it relates to the mindset of femininity, what is that balance? We're not trying to be men. We're trying to be everything that a woman is. And so I wonder for you, because I know now you've talked about your new husband and really what a blessing he's been. How did you heal in your thoughts and your emotions to be able to marry again and then look at that marriage with a fresh set of eyes? Are you able to do that? What did you have to do to get there?
I think it's because of who Matt is, to be very honest with you. I wasn't in my marriage a very long time. And like I said, I wasn't physically abused. And who my parents raised me to be, the fact that I was somebody who had never come from anybody in law enforcement and decided, hey, I'm going to go be part of the boys club as part of a career choice. I think that just is who I am. And then, Matt came along, and he is much younger than me, like 9 years younger than me. And he was 22 when I met him, and like all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and, had never really had any major relationships or anything like that. His parents were both great, he kind of had the same life I did. And, it was him. He's just the kind of man that shows up every single day in little ways, and he values who I am, and he is my biggest cheerleader, and he never says, can you take a step back? He's always like, what can we do to help you reach your goals, and at the same time reaching his own goals. You know, it's such a great partnership, and I use the word balance, but it's always unbalanced because he's picking up the slack that I can't take care of, and vice versa when he needs to do something. And, you know, the biggest thing for my relationship with him is that he always makes me feel safe. Like, it's, you know, just we've never argued, and people look at me like I'm crazy, but we don't raise our voices to each other. And after my ex-husband, I vowed that I would never be in a relationship. I don't even like yelling at people when I have to at work, right? Like, sometimes you have to raise your voice, but I just feel like it's so disrespectful. Like, you and I can have disagreements. We can disagree on things. That doesn't mean that I need to belittle you or call you names or make you feel like less of a person. And I refuse to be in a relationship with anybody that was going to act like that. And it wasn't even a conversation him and I had to have. He's just that person. He's just my blessing. Like, everything that I went through, it sucks, right? You can sit here and you can blame God and you can blame your circumstances and you can be mad at yourself for allowing that to happen. Or you could take my mindset and say, you know what, everything does happen for a reason. And as crappy as that it can be to hear over and over and over again, especially if you keep getting dealt these hands that are tough, it also, when hindsight being 2020, you look back and you see, I went through this, but look at what God has blessed me with because of what I went through. And look at how much more powerful of an impact I can have on people, because not only can I relate to them, but I'm trying to be as genuine as possible in helping them. It isn't this, you know, empathetic versus sympathetic kind of mindset. Right. And I just, you know, I try to do the same thing, like words of affirmation and, you know, journaling and making my kids feel that they are important in a world right now where, you know, you look on Instagram and your self-worth plummets because everyone's perfect. And, you know, my 5-year-old will tell you in the morning, every morning she looks in the mirror and she says, I am smart. I'm a good friend. I am going to be good to people. I will show people respect. I am beautiful inside and out. And I'm going to change the world. And that is my kids. They say it every morning, because the more they hear the good, the less they'll tolerate the bad.
Right. And I love that. And it's weird though, because you came from good. You didn't come into that first relationship broken and not thinking you were worthy, but for whatever reason it happened to you. But you've been able to now rebuild that inner strength. Because I mean, I think, you know, giving advice and help to people that have been either in the abusive relationship or just married to a narcissist. I mean, I hear stories just alone being married to, and I mean, people use that word a lot, but a valid narcissist, that is emotional abuse. That is where you question everything. You question yourself, right? I mean, I hear these stories. So these women who are trying to come out of that, what is the best thing you can tell them to do?
You know, every single person's story is different. Every single person. So I try to find something in someone that they love about themselves. And when there isn't something, I try to have them find something. And it's really being okay with who you are in order to be okay without someone else. I mean, it really is that. And there's just so many roadblocks, right? Like, victims are victims of violence because of certain situations. We don't choose to be a victim. We don't say we want to be a victim. And there is a big difference between a victim mindset and a warrior mindset, right? If I'm walking down the street and I'm paying attention to my phone and I have my AirPods in and I'm walking down an alley and I kind of turn the wrong way, like, I didn't intentionally do that because I wanted to be a victim, but a circumstance might arise where I become one.
Right.
And I can turn around and I can be angry about it, or I can turn around and say, you know what, I've learned my lesson and I'm going to move forward. And I'm not, you know, and it's the same thing with being in a relationship. Like, it's intimacy violence. And unfortunately with intimacy violence, it's the hardest to get out of, because that person knows what to do to manipulate you. Otherwise you wouldn't even be where you are. And that's what makes you feel weak, and it makes you feel stupid, and it makes you feel like you are not the person that you should be, and that you might not even be worthy of being here. And that's a dark hole to be down. And so, I mean, I was really lucky and fortunate to know that there were services and to know that there was a way out, and to have incredible friends and family who moved me out of my house immediately and helped me start back up. And, there was none of this, how did you let this happen? There was none of that. But, you'll see people come here and, move from other states or move from other countries. And whether it's part of their culture or they just don't have any roots or anybody to depend on, it's harder. Every situation is different, and it's just knowing your value. And
Right.
even if your value is, I need to be a mom to a kid who's not going to go through the same thing, then put that first for your kids, because it's hard enough to walk away. And no matter what, I see it all the time. Victims of domestic violence always say, my kids don't know what's going on. They absolutely do.
Wow.
Kids are the most perceptive in the world. And even if you guys aren't arguing in front of them, they're going to see how you subconsciously move when they touch you or come near you, and how you jump a little bit more, but you are open and warm with them. They're going to notice those little things that are stressors in a relationship that aren't verbal, that, aren't articulated, and they pick up on those cues. I mean, think about it. Kids don't understand how to talk when they're born, but they understand your warm touch, the way you hold them, the humming, and they can pick up on that. It's the same thing. So, I always try to plead with somebody who doesn't know their own worth to at least know the worth that they are to their children. And that helps. But,
at least if they have to start there, at least with that, right? That's a starting point. Yeah. Well, I love that you are enough. I feel like that's a theme through what you're saying to people. And obviously you taught your kids that mantra as a result of what you've been through, but also because you see that they need that in this world. It's very easy to walk out of the front door and have that stripped from you. I mean, we're constantly fighting the thoughts that are in our head that want to hold us back, and then how we react to what's happened to us. The way you've described it, I think, is so important, that it's not what happened to you, it's how you decided to deal with it. What are you doing with it now? What are you going to do with it to make your life better, your kids' life better, other people's lives better? Nothing that happens to us should go wasted. We have to find a way to, I think, bring that back into purpose. And so now you, not only through your job, you've been exposed to people, but I know people are getting to know you and your story. So tell us about the book that you're writing. Tell us about your heart that's in it. I want everyone to know about the book, and when it comes out, we're going to talk about it again. But tell us what's going on with that project.
Well, I'm in the middle of writing it.
Yes.
Obviously, it's not done yet. Every time I write a chapter, I go back and find another chapter. And I had one name of the book, and I think I'm changing it. So I'm kind of in the middle of that, but it really does. It tells my story, and it goes more in depth to, I call it the chapter before the chapter, right? So the chapter of my life that completely changed me, the chapter of change, was October 16th, 2008. That was the night everything happened with my ex-husband and I. But there's all this stuff beforehand that I know contributed to me being able to get out of that relationship safely and in a better mind. So, it's really about all the circumstances I've been in through my life where my mindset's really helped me overcome other people's stereotypes of me and other people trying to hold back the true me, and also my own mind allowing that to happen.
Yes.
And I'm excited for it to come out. And then, there's this one project that's really very, very dear to my heart. And it's a company that I signed on to be a law enforcement advisor for. And I just kind of want to give it a shout out because, as we mentioned, me not talking about the abuse that happened prior to that incident really was the downfall to me not feeling as safe as I could when he was released. And, not being able to have a record of the stuff that I was going through. And this woman, Sherry, has created this app called Victim's Voice. And what Victim's Voice does is it allows victims to record, to remember. So basically, anytime something is happening, if you are not ready to come forward to the police, you can use this app and you can record it. And everything is, digitally based, where if you touch a certain way, so what ends up happening is it makes it so it's admissible in court.
Wow.
And it never was before. And she has made strides to make it. And I work with her to make sure that the right questions are being asked on the law enforcement end to help not only charge, but prosecute people. So if something were to happen to you, you could designate somebody to be able to get all these records, and you can't go back and change them. Anything you put in there is saved and can only be accessed by you or your one designee at a one time. And it's brilliant. And I'm so impressed by her thinking about it, because I honestly feel like if I had that 10.5 years ago and I was able to present that, like, my ex-husband would have gone away for a lot longer. A lot longer.
Right.
But back then, things that happened prior, if they weren't reported to police, were not admissible. And now they are because of this.
What is the app called again? What is the name of it?
Victim's Voice. And it's all one word.
Okay.
And you can, if you don't have a smartphone, you can use, the county library and use it on a desktop. And, there's a nominal fee because they obviously have to store all your information private on a server so nobody else can access it. But it's there forever. So if you're in a violent relationship or in a harassing relationship or anything, and you decide to record everything that's going on, and you and this person aren't together anymore, and 2.5, 3 years down the line, they turn around and start harassing you or stalking you, you can bring it out then, even if you haven't touched the app. And, there's a safe exit. So if somebody walks in the room, you push the button, immediately goes to the weather channel. Like, she's just thought of everything to keep people safe and to help people. And I'm just, it really is a great resource.
Oh my gosh, what an amazing project for you to be a part of. That's incredible.
Yeah. I love it. I'm very excited. Yeah.
I hope that helps somebody that's listening today. So tell us when the book's going to be done. Don't you? I love that question because, people ask me that. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. I wanted it done like in October.
Okay.
But, my goal was to have it published by the time I turn 40, which is in April. But I think my goal is to really get it done by then. Yeah. I just had a recent surgery and my plan was to try and work on it then. But, then you're just worried about recovery and stuff. And, life gets in the way. And I while it's a really important thing for me to finish, I juggle so many things. So my goal is by April to have it done and ready to go out into the world and be hopefully published and all that. So I will definitely keep you updated.
Yeah, we'll agree that it's a 2020 intention, right? Because as an author myself, I have all the empathy in the world and I get it. You got to get to a point sometime where, it ebbs and it flows, but let's just have an intention that this is a 2020 book. I think people need to read it. I think you probably have more than one book in you, right? You've been feeling like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And hopefully some speaking platforms and things that will come. You're a very well-spoken woman, and I know that a lot of people are now getting to know your story. And I have to tell you, I admire you. I love that you have worked and fought your way back to where you should have been before this marriage happened, but also to recognize that even throughout your life, because it's happened to all of us, people told you, you can't be that, or sit down, shut up, or don't be that much, or you're too much, or whatever, or you're not enough, whatever those words were. And that's really something that all of us have to fight through in order to walk in our purpose. Otherwise, we're never brave enough to walk in our purpose. And you definitely get the Brave Award. I have to tell you that. I'm blown away and grateful that you would be willing to be so transparent and so honest with your story. I 100% know that somebody listening to this, this is going to be on the web forever. And somebody is going to hear this. And if you've helped just one person, then it's all worthwhile. And I know that you feel that way.
Absolutely.
So it's awesome that you have been willing to share with us. I want to get the book, obviously trotted out once you're done with it. And I'll be watching and trying to help with that. I know you sent me some things to read. I got to get on that. It's been a little crazy.
Thank you. I appreciate it because your book is incredible. So I'd love any feedback that you have.
Well, you and I kind of flow similarly when it comes to all that mindset stuff. So I just want to tell you that you're an awesome mom. You're obviously somebody who makes a great friend and a great wife, and credit to you to holding on to deciding to not be a victim and persevere. And I know that God has an amazing plan for you. So I can't wait to see it all come to pass. If people want to, find out more what you're doing or just find a way to connect with you, are you comfortable giving out some kind of social media information or blog location or something like that?
Yeah. So I actually have an Instagram page, which is, I actually have two Instagram pages, but my personal one, I don't necessarily always receive information on, but the one that everybody can find me on is, it's Flip the Coin for Change, and there's like no underscores or anything. So Flip the Coin for Change. And it really just is that basic mindset of, when people see a coin on the ground and it's on heads, they automatically think, oh, this is good luck. I don't ever pick it up. I leave it for somebody else. I feel like I make my own mindset, I control my own universe with my thoughts. And some people just don't have that ability yet. So if it's on tails, I flip it so people can find it heads up and hopefully have a better day. But that's where the Instagram comes from. It's Flip the Coin for Change. And people can reach out to me there, private message me, just or follow me there for some updates.
Okay, good. That's a good place. And we'll have you back on. And to anyone who's listening, guys, you are enough. You are definitely enough. And I just hope that you've heard something today that will help you. Heather, thank you so much for being willing to talk this much about that much level of detail. I really, really appreciate it. And once the book gets closer to completion, we'll talk again, okay?
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, Heather, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
And guys, you know what? Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Definitely, so you don't miss anything. It comes out Tuesday morning, 7 Eastern. And also, Master Your Mindset Reset. We're having a seminar, the first one in 2020, on Saturday, March 28th in Northern New Jersey. So I'll be sending out some information so you can get early bird registration. I am capping this at 20 people. So it's going to be an exclusive event. You don't want to miss it. It's a game changer. It will help you break through barriers that you've been struggling with. More on that to come. And we'll see you guys online.
Thank you for listening to Master Your Mindset Radio. Before you go, if you want to be part of a free online community of like-minded individuals for support, resources, and inspiration as you conquer your limiting beliefs and pursue your purpose, go to elizabethnader.com/community. That's elizabethnader.com/community, or search for Master Your Mindset Academy private group on Facebook. Looking forward to seeing you online.